Emily Donovan had always considered herself a rational woman. She didn't believe in ghosts, superstitions, or urban legends. She preferred logic, reason, and facts. So when her phone rang at exactly 2 a.m., she didn't think much of it. Probably a wrong number. Lying in bed, half asleep, she reached for the device and squinted at the screen. The caller ID showed unknown caller. Her heart skipped a beat. She hesitated but swiped to answer. Hello. Her voice was hoarse from sleep. For a moment, there was silence. A faint crackling sound, like someone breathing over the line. Then a whisper.
Low.
Distorted. Unfamiliar. Don't trust him. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She sat up abruptly, her fingers tightening around the phone. Who is this? She demanded. But the line went dead. Emily stared at the screen, her pulse racing. 2:01 a.m. Call ended. A prank, she told herself. Some random creep messing with strangers. She placed the phone back on her nightstand and glanced over at the man sleeping beside her. Daniel. His chest rose and fell in the rhythmic pattern of deep sleep, his face calm, his features illuminated by the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains. Emily hesitated. The warning replayed in her mind. Don't trust him. She shook her head. Ridiculous. With a sigh, she lay back down, pulling the blanket up to her shoulders. It was just a prank. It had to be. The next morning, she nearly forgot about the call. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air as Daniel stood by the kitchen counter, pouring 2 cups. Morning, beautiful, he said, flashing her a warm smile. Emily smiled back. Morning. She wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, inhaling the scent of his aftershave. How'd you sleep? He asked, handing her a mug.
Fine, she lied.
Should she tell him about the call? No, that would be stupid. He'd probably laugh and tell her she was overthinking it. Instead, she changed the subject. Do you have a busy day today? Daniel nodded, sipping his coffee.
Yeah.
Meetings all morning, but I should be done by 6. Dinner together? Emily nodded. Sounds perfect. They kissed, and for a brief moment, everything felt normal. The strange phone call faded to the back of her mind. But that night, at exactly 2 a.m., her phone rang again. Emily jolted awake at the sound of her ringtone. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark room. She grabbed it, pulse quickening. Unknown caller. Her hands trembled slightly as she answered. Hello. A beat of silence. Then the same distorted whisper. Don't trust him. Emily's breath hitched.
Who are you?
What do you want? But the caller had already hung up. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, staring at the phone. Twice now. The exact same time. The exact same warning. She turned to Daniel, who was still asleep beside her. She studied his face. The sharp jawline, the slight stubble, the way his lips parted slightly with each breath. The man she had been dating for 2 months. The man she was falling for. She shook her head. This is crazy. A prank. A coincidence. It has nothing to do with Daniel. Right? The next day at work, Emily couldn't focus. She sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen, barely hearing her coworkers chatter around her. Her best friend, Sarah, leaned over. Earth to Emily? Emily blinked. Huh. You've been zoning out all morning. What's up? Emily hesitated. Then, lowering her voice, she told Sarah about the calls. Sarah frowned. That's creepy as hell. Have you tried blocking the number? It's an unknown caller, Emily said. I can't. Sarah leaned in. And you're sure it's a prank? Emily hesitated. What else could it be? Sarah's expression darkened. I don't know, but what if it's not random? What if it's about Daniel? Emily scoffed. Come on. That's ridiculous. Is it? Sarah pressed. You said you've only been dating him for 2 months. How much do you really know about him? Emily bit her lip. Sarah sighed. Look, I'm not saying he's dangerous, but just be careful, okay? Emily nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, I will. But she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that followed her home that night. And when her phone rang at 2 a.m., She felt a sharp sense of dread settle in her chest. This time, she didn't answer. She watched as her phone vibrated on the nightstand, the screen glowing in the darkness. Unknown caller. The call went to voicemail. Hands trembling, she tapped on the message. A crackle of static. Then the whisper. "He knows you're looking." Emily's blood ran cold. She gripped the sheets, her breath shallow. This wasn't random. This wasn't a prank. Someone was watching her. She turned her gaze to Daniel, who slept soundly beside her. A chilling thought crept into her mind. Who was watching her? And who were they warning her about? Emily decided she needed answers. The next day, when Daniel left for work, she searched his apartment. She felt guilty for invading his privacy, but she needed to put her paranoia to rest. She checked his drawers, his closet, his nightstand. Nothing unusual. Then, in the back of his closet, she found a small box. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside were women's jewelry, bracelets, rings, necklaces. Some looked old. Some looked worn. And then she saw it. A locket. Engraved with a name. Lisa Monroe. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Lisa Monroe. The name sounded familiar. Where had she heard it before? Her mind raced, and then it hit her. An old news article. A missing persons report. Lisa Monroe had disappeared 2 years ago. And Daniel had her necklace. Emily's stomach twisted. Who the hell was she dating? Emily's hands trembled as she held the locket between her fingers. It was heavier than it looked, the metal cool against her palm. Inside, there was a small picture. A woman. She had dark curls, soft brown eyes, and a gentle smile. The kind of face that seemed warm, trusting. Lisa Monroe, a missing person. And her boyfriend, Daniel, had this woman's necklace in his closet. Emily's heart pounded as she shut the box, pushing it back into its place. She needed to get out of there before Daniel came home. She couldn't jump to conclusions. Maybe he had an explanation. Maybe it was a gift from an ex-girlfriend. But deep down, she felt it. That creeping, twisting fear. What if the warning calls were true? That night, when Daniel came home, she couldn't look at him the same way. He walked in, tossing his keys on the counter, and pulled her into his arms like nothing was wrong. "Hey, babe." His lips brushed against her forehead. "I missed you today." Emily's breath hitched. She tried to relax into his touch, but the warmth of his embrace felt different now, tainted with suspicion. "Missed you too," she murmured. Daniel pulled back, smiling. "You okay? You seem quiet." Emily forced a laugh. "Just tired." His gaze lingered on her for a moment, studying her. Then he smirked, reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You need to take better care of yourself." His fingers trailed along her jawline, slow and deliberate. "Maybe I should take you on a little getaway this weekend. Just the two of us." Her stomach clenched. A weekend away alone?
No.
That wasn't a good idea. But she couldn't let him know she was afraid. So she forced another smile and nodded. "That sounds nice." That night, she lay in bed beside him, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding with unease. Then, at exactly 2 a.m., her phone rang again. Her hands shook as she grabbed it. Unknown caller. She swallowed hard, then answered. "Who are you?" she whispered. Silence. Then, the distorted voice. "You're running out of time." Emily's throat tightened. "Please tell me what you mean." The call ended. She sat there, gripping the phone, cold sweat on her skin. Running out of time for what? She turned to look at Daniel. He was still asleep. Peaceful. Too peaceful. Emily had the sinking feeling that if she didn't find the truth soon, she wouldn't live long enough to regret it. Chapter 5. A Dangerous Attraction. The next morning, Emily made a decision. She couldn't just sit back and wait for the truth to reveal itself. She needed answers. She needed to know who Lisa Monroe was and why Daniel had her necklace. So she did what any rational woman in her position would do. She lied to her boyfriend. "Hey," she said casually over breakfast. "I'm meeting Sarah for drinks after work. I might be home late." Daniel glanced up from his coffee, raising an eyebrow. "Want me to pick you up?" Emily shook her head quickly.
No.
We'll probably just take an Uber. His gaze lingered on her for a second too long. Then he nodded. All right. She forced a smile and kissed his cheek before heading out. But instead of meeting Sarah, Emily drove across town to the police station. She sat in the car for a long moment, fingers tightening around the steering wheel. Would they even talk to her? Would they think she was crazy? Screw it. She took a deep breath and walked inside. A young officer sat at the front desk. He looked up, offering a polite smile. Can I help you? Emily hesitated, then said, I need information about a missing person. Lisa Monroe. The officer's smile faded. He studied her carefully. Why? Emily swallowed hard. She hesitated. How much should she say? I just knew her. A long time ago. The officer sighed and leaned back. Lisa Monroe went missing 2 years ago. No leads, no body, nothing. It's an open case, but he shook his head. Honestly, we think she's dead. Emily's stomach clenched. But, he continued, her disappearance was suspicious. No sign of forced entry at her apartment. No struggle. It was like she just vanished. Emily licked her lips. Did she have a boyfriend? The officer frowned. Not that we could confirm, but he hesitated. There were rumors. Emily's pulse pounded. What kind of rumors? The officer sighed. That she was seeing someone. But whoever he was, he never came forward. Cold fear coiled in Emily's chest. She thought of the necklace in Daniel's closet, the missing girl, the warning calls, and then, miss. Emily snapped back to reality. The officer was watching her closely. You okay? She forced a nod. Yeah, thanks. Then she turned and left. She had heard enough. That night, when she got home, Daniel was waiting for her. His eyes dark, intense. You're late, he said softly. Emily's breath caught. She set her purse down carefully. Yeah. Sarah and I. His fingers gripped her wrist, stopping her. A slow smile spread across his lips. You smell different, he murmured, leaning in. Emily's heart pounded. Perfume, he asked, his grip tightening slightly. Or maybe someone else's cologne? Emily forced herself to stay calm. Daniel, you're hurting me. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he let go, chuckling. Sorry, babe. He kissed her temple. You know I just worry about you. Emily forced a smile. I know. But as she turned away, her pulse was racing. Because for the first time since she met Daniel, she knew she was in serious danger. Emily barely slept that night. Even with Daniel's arms wrapped around her, his body warm and familiar, her mind raced with fear. He knows something. The way he looked at her when she got home. The way his fingers tightened around her wrist. He suspected something. She lay in bed, her breath slow and even, pretending to be asleep. Then, a shift. Daniel moved. She kept her eyes shut, her heart pounding as she felt him carefully slide out of bed. The mattress dipped as he stood. Emily listened. Soft footsteps. The door to the bedroom creaked open. Then silence. She counted the seconds in her head, waiting. A minute passed. Then another. Slowly, she pushed back the covers and slipped out of bed. The air in the apartment felt too still. She tiptoed to the door and peeked through the crack. Daniel was in the living room, standing by the window. On his phone. His voice was low, barely above a whisper. Emily strained to hear. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. She swallowed hard. Take care of what? Another pause. Then, she doesn't know anything. Cold fear curled in her stomach. Daniel ended the call and ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. Emily slipped back into bed before he could notice she was watching. She lay still, her mind racing. Who was he talking to? What was he hiding? And most importantly, was she safe? The next morning, Emily tried to act normal. She cooked breakfast, smiled at Daniel, let him kiss her like nothing was wrong. But inside, she was screaming. After he left for work, she grabbed her phone. She needed help. Sarah, her best friend, the one person she could trust. She dialed her number. It rang twice before Sarah picked up. What's up? Emily hesitated. Then, lowering her voice, she said, I think Daniel is hiding something. A pause. Then, what do you mean? Emily swallowed. I went to the police station. I asked about Lisa Monroe. Sarah gasped. The missing girl? Yes. Emily ran a hand through her hair. Sarah, they said she was seeing someone before she disappeared. But he never came forward. Silence. Then Sarah whispered, You think it was Daniel? Emily closed her eyes. I don't know. But I found her necklace in his closet. Oh my God. I need to figure out the truth, Emily said. Before it's too late. Sarah took a deep breath. Okay. What do you want to do? Emily's fingers tightened around her phone. I need to find out what happened to Lisa. That night, Emily was careful. She pretended to be the perfect girlfriend. She laughed at Daniel's jokes. Let him touch her. Let him think she wasn't afraid. But in reality, she was planning her escape. If Daniel really was dangerous, she couldn't stay. But she couldn't just run either. Because if he had hurt Lisa, she could be next. She needed proof. She needed to know the truth. So when Daniel fell asleep, Emily got up. She grabbed his keys. And she did something she never thought she would do. She followed him. Emily wasn't sure what scared her more, the secrets Daniel was keeping or the way he made her feel. She was supposed to be investigating him, watching his every move. Instead, she found herself getting pulled deeper into him. It was in the way he looked at her, like she was the only woman in the world. The way he touched her, slow, possessive, as if he was claiming her. The way he whispered her name at night, his voice husky with desire. God, it would be so much easier if she didn't love him. She had followed him last night, slipped into her car and trailed behind him, heart pounding as he drove across town. She expected him to go somewhere suspicious. A warehouse, a shady bar, maybe even meet someone in secret.
But no.
He drove to a graveyard. Emily watched from a distance as Daniel got out of the car, a bouquet of white roses in his hands. He walked to a grave, kneeled, and for the first time since she met him, he looked vulnerable. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She inched closer, keeping to the shadows. She couldn't see the name on the headstone. But when Daniel pressed his lips to the tips of his fingers and touched the grave, her heart twisted. Was he grieving? Was she wrong about him?
Or
was this the final piece of proof that he had done something terrible? That night, when she got home, she expected Daniel to be cold,
distant.
Instead, he was waiting for her. He pulled her into his arms the moment she stepped inside, burying his face in her neck. She gasped, startled. Daniel. I missed you, he murmured. His lips brushed her skin, slow, deliberate. Where were you? Her breath hitched. She had lied so many times before. Told him she was with Sarah, or working late, or out shopping. But something about the way he held her tonight, it made her hesitate. She couldn't lie. Not this time. I saw you, she whispered. Daniel tensed. He pulled back, his eyes darkening. What do you mean? Emily swallowed hard. I followed you. To the graveyard. A long silence. Then Daniel let out a soft chuckle. You're spying on me now, sweetheart? His tone was teasing, but his grip on her waist tightened. Emily forced herself to stay calm. Why didn't you tell me? Another pause. Then, it's my sister's grave. Emily's eyes widened. Sister? Daniel nodded slowly. Lisa. Her breath caught. Lisa. Lisa Monroe. The missing woman. She couldn't breathe. You told me you didn't have a sister. Daniel's jaw clenched. I lied, he admitted. His fingers trailed down her arm, slow, possessive. Because I didn't want you to look into her death. Emily's heart raced. Lisa wasn't missing. She was dead. And Daniel had been keeping it a secret. She should be terrified. She should pull away.
Run.
But when he tilted her chin up, looking at her like she was his entire world, she melted. Emily, he murmured. You have to trust me. Her pulse pounded.
She wanted to. God, she wanted to.
But how could she, when she knew he was lying? And worse, when she wasn't sure she even cared anymore. Emily didn't know how it happened. One moment, she was standing there, terrified and confused. The next, Daniel's lips crashed against hers. A kiss that was wild, desperate, intoxicating. She gasped, hands gripping his shirt, feeling the heat of his body against hers. She knew this was wrong. She should pull away, demand answers,
Fight back.
but God, when he touched her like this, nothing else mattered. His hands slid down her waist, pulling her against him. "I would never hurt you," he whispered against her lips. "You know that, don't you?" Her heart ached. She didn't know what to believe anymore. All she knew was that when he kissed her like this, when his arms wrapped around her like he would never let go, she wanted to believe him, even if it killed her. Emily woke up tangled in Daniel's arms. His warmth, his scent, the steady rhythm of his breathing. It should have comforted her. Instead, it felt like a chain wrapped around her body. She was trapped. Her head rested against his bare chest, rising and falling with each slow breath. Last night had been a mistake. A dangerous, beautiful mistake. She had kissed him, let him own her, consume her. And for a moment, just a moment, she forgot why she was afraid of him. But reality came crashing back. Lisa Monroe was dead. And Daniel had lied about it. Emily shifted slightly, her heart racing as she tried to move. But the second she did, his grip tightened. Daniel made a low sound, half asleep, and pulled her closer. "Where are you going?" he murmured against her hair. Emily swallowed hard. "Bathroom," she whispered. He didn't answer right away. Then, his fingers brushed against her bare skin, tracing slow circles on her waist. "You're thinking too much again," he murmured, his voice husky from sleep. She shivered. How did he always know? "I can feel it." His lips skimmed her shoulder. "Your body gets stiff when you don't trust me." Her pulse pounded. She forced a small laugh, pretending to be the woman he thought she was. "I trust you," she whispered. A lie. A necessary one. Daniel exhaled slowly, his arms finally loosening. Emily slipped out of bed and grabbed her robe, walking toward the bathroom with her heart hammering in her chest. The second she closed the door behind her, she let out a shaky breath. She needed to get out of here. Lisa's death wasn't an accident. She could feel it. And if Daniel was hiding that, what else was he hiding? Emily tried to be careful. She played her part, kissed him when he wanted, let him hold her at night. But her mind was spinning. She had to find out the truth. She had to know if Daniel was dangerous. And that meant going back to the one place that terrified her. Lisa's grave. That evening, when Daniel left for work, Emily grabbed her coat and headed to the cemetery. The air was cold, the sky a deep shade of gray. The grave was exactly where she remembered. A single white rose rested on the stone. Emily's throat tightened. Lisa Monroe, beloved sister, taken too soon.
But how?
Emily reached out, brushing her fingers over the name. Emily. Her heart stopped. She turned slowly, her pulse screaming in her ears. Daniel stood behind her. His expression was unreadable. "What are you doing here?" he asked softly. Emily's mouth went dry. Daniel took a slow step toward her. His hands were in his pockets. His gaze dark and unreadable. "You're lying to me," he murmured. Her blood ran cold. He knew. She didn't know how, but he knew. Emily took a step back. "Daniel, He moved faster than she expected. A firm grip. Warm hands on her face, tilting her chin up, forcing her to look at him. "Tell me the truth," he whispered. Her breath caught. He was too close. Too warm. And God help her. She still wanted him. She was losing herself. Falling into a dangerous love that might kill her. Her lips parted. "Did you kill her?" she whispered. Daniel's expression darkened. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "Would you still love me if I did?" Emily's breath hitched. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. "Would you still love me if I did?" Her body froze. Her heart pounded. She searched his face, desperate for an answer. Was this a confession? Or a test? She swallowed hard. "Why would you say that?" Daniel exhaled slowly. His thumb traced her cheek, gentle, tender, contradictory to the fear clawing at her chest. "Because I need to know," he murmured. "If you love me, or if you're just trying to escape." Her blood ran cold. He knew. She forced herself to stay calm. "I love you," she whispered. Another lie. Or was it? Because deep down, no matter how much she feared him, she still wanted him. Daniel's lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "Then don't run," he whispered. Her heart stopped. Had he been waiting for her to leave? Had he known all along? She needed to get away. But if she made one wrong move, she wouldn't make it out at all. Emily played her role perfectly. She kissed him when he touched her, smiled when he held her, pretended she wasn't afraid. But inside, she was screaming. She had one chance. Tonight, when he slept, she would leave. She had to, no matter how much it hurt. That night, Emily waited. She felt Daniel's breath slow, felt his arms around her relax. She slipped out of bed, silent, careful. Her heart pounded as she grabbed her bag. One step.
Two.
She made it to the door.
Click.
The lamp flicked on. Her stomach dropped. Daniel sat up in bed, watching her. "You were going to leave." His voice was quiet. Too quiet. Emily's throat tightened. "Daniel." He stood up, walking toward her slowly, deliberately. "Did you ever love me?" he whispered. Her pulse screamed. "Yes," she lied. A muscle in his jaw ticked. And then, to her shock, he stepped aside. "You want to leave?" he said. "Then go." Emily hesitated. This was too easy. But she couldn't risk staying. She turned, stepping out into the night. And for the first time, since it all began, she ran. Emily didn't stop running until she reached her car. She fumbled with the keys, hands shaking. The second the engine roared to life, her phone rang. Her breath hitched. 2 a.m. The unknown number. She answered. "Don't trust him," the voice whispered. Emily's pulse pounded. "Who are you?" she demanded. Silence. Then, a voice she recognized. "I told you not to trust him," Sarah whispered. Emily's best friend. Her stomach dropped. "You?" Emily gasped. "You've been calling me?" Sarah exhaled shakily. "I was trying to protect you." Emily's mind spun. "From what?" she whispered. Silence. Then, "The truth," Sarah said. Sarah met her at a motel. Emily's hands trembled as she demanded answers. "Tell me everything." Sarah hesitated. Then she whispered. "Lisa didn't die in an accident." Emily's heart stopped. "What?" Sarah's expression was pained. "She was murdered." The room spun. Emily shook her head. "Then Daniel." Sarah bit her lip. "Daniel didn't kill her." Emily froze. "What?" Sarah took a deep breath. "She was killed by someone who wanted to hurt him." Emily's mind raced. All this time, she thought Daniel was hiding something terrible. But he was protecting her from the same people who took his sister. And she had left him. Emily's chest ached. She had to see him. She had to tell him she knew the truth. That she never should have doubted him. She rushed back to his house, heart racing. But when she got there, the door was wide open. Her blood ran cold. She stepped inside, calling his name. No answer. Then she saw it. A single white rose. And a note. For words. "You should have stayed." Emily's breath hitched. Daniel was gone. And this time, she was the one who had lost him. Days passed. Weeks. Daniel was nowhere. Emily searched everywhere. She finally knew the truth, and she wouldn't stop until she found him. Because she did love him. And now, she would do anything to bring him back. No matter the cost. 1 month later, Emily sat in her apartment, staring at her phone. 2 a.m. It rang. Her breath caught. She answered. Silence. Then, a familiar voice. "Don't trust them." Emily's heart pounded. This wasn't Sarah. It was Daniel. And he was warning her. From the shadows. From the real danger. And this time, Emily wouldn't let him face it alone. Emily wasn't afraid anymore. She was done running. She was done doubting. Daniel had protected her. Now, it was her turn to find him. to save him. And this time, she wouldn't stop until she found out the real truth. Because their story wasn't over yet. Not until she had him back. Not until they faced the darkness together. 1 year later, Emily stood at Lisa's grave, a single white rose in her hand. She hadn't seen Daniel in 12 months. But she still waited, still believed. And then, a shadow moved behind her. A voice, deep and familiar, whispered, "You never stopped looking for me." Her breath caught. She turned. And there he was, Daniel,
Alive.
waiting for her. Her eyes burned. "I told you I love you." A slow, knowing smile. And then he whispered, "Then trust me."
She did.
This time she would. As Daniel pulled her into his arms, Emily knew one thing for sure. Their story wasn't over. Not yet. Not ever.